Hi, my name is Antoinette Londejean, and I say it every time, but I am thrilled to be here with Riaan Moller of MAN Vineyards. Riaan is not just a one-trick pony. We have MAN Vineyards as an umbrella company, and then underneath MAN, we have MAN, Lievland, and we have SA. Riaan is the head winemaker for all three labels, and within the three labels, we have multiple labels. So it's a little bit tricky. But Riaan is here to explain about everything there is to know about MAN Vineyards, starting with an introduction. Riaan, please tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got here.
Hey Antoinette, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to this chat. As always, I always enjoy talking to people and expect to spread the story about MAN and about Lievland, and yeah, to spread the love across the world for wines. So my background, I've been in wine for about 20 years, about 22 years actually. And I actually by accident fell into the wine industry. This is actually a career I never thought about following. And I was literally after school, I went to travel Europe and I came back to South Africa. And then one of my mates asked me if I want to join the harvest team during harvest. And I said, yeah, why not? And that's where my love affair with wine started. I did that for a few vintages and then finally decided, well, I want to study wine and follow that, full time, and moved back with my folks, hang up my gumboots and yeah, swap the harvest time and grapes for the desk again and went back to school. So I completed my small 4-year degree, 4-year studies at Elsenburg in Stellenbosch. And after that, yeah, went back into the wine industry and went flat out. And today it's, yeah, like I said, it's almost 20 years later. It feels like the other day. And we were joking the other day with one of my friends about how quickly time actually in the wine industry passes, because you work in these cycles. In a cycle, eventually actually go past so quickly, and you always prepare, for the next cycle. So you always live almost in 2 yearly cycles the whole time, because you've got the new vintage and the current vintage, or the coming vintage and the current vintage you always have to work with. But back to MAN and Lievland. So I've joined MAN about in 2017, end of 2016. I've known them for a long time. I've been working with the family through different ways for about 16, 17 years almost. And I joined them as part of the team, like I said, in the end of 2016. And initially, it only started just for the MAN wines, and then afterwards, shortly afterwards, the ESA wines also became part of the portfolio. And then later in 2017, we acquired the Lievland property, and that also became part of our portfolio.
Well, you say 20 years. It is a long time, but at the same time, it's only quote unquote 20 harvests and 20 productions. So it's really the pressure is on every year for you, and you have a lot to embrace. So you came in 2017, you had MAN and SA that were sort of chugging along, and then we sort of see you sink your teeth into the Lievland project. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Lievland project is?
So my love affair with Lievland, and by the way, the word Lievland and actually Loveland, because once you come here, you really fall in love with the property. So my love affair with Lievland actually started back in 2000 when I came to the property just as a visitor, and I fell in love with the property. And over the years, I always kept track of what exactly is going on here. I followed the wines and so on, and really fell in love with the wines also. And then when I joined MAN Family Wines in 2017, like I said, this also came on board. So since 2017, we've started with a massive replanting project, rebuilding, renovating project on Lievland. We know it's got a lot of potential. The soils here are very, very good. We've got a lot of water available to us. And then the landscape here is quite unique, which gives us quite a lot of different pockets we can make with different wines from. So we started with the first plantings. Planting started in 2017. In 2018, we started to replant. We started with about 30 acres to start off with in the first year. And we're focusing really on what works in our area. When we started right back in the beginning, and when we took Lievland in the brand as a brand, we asked ourselves, what do we want to do with Lievland? What brands and what wines, at least, do we see can work under the Lievland brand? And we said Cabernet is quite important for us. Across all our brands, we do quite a bit of Cabernet. Chenin Blanc, definitely. I think Chenin Blanc is the flag bearer of South African wine industry. Because we're South African, Pinotage also, and what else? And then Sauvignon Blanc and Rosé, and that's the varieties we decided to kind of stick to. So to give you an idea, that's basically what led us over this last few years in our plantings. We've planted already about 60%. We've planted Cabernet, about 30% Pinotage, Chenin Blanc, about 15% almost. And the rest is like Petit Verdot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, Syrah, and those kind of things. So it's a bit of a mixed bags of different varieties. But yeah, it's like I said, it's nice to work with these different pockets, even with different Cabernets sitting on a north slope or western slope, southern slope is very different, and that gives us the ability to create quite an array of different Cabernets, which we can at the end can blend back together, and likewise with the other varieties.
And so we're talking about 100% estate fruit for Lievland, correct?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. The only variety which is not 100% at the moment is our Chenin Blanc. So the Chenin Blanc is old vine certified. Now, just to give you a better idea what old vine certified means, so there's an organization that was started about 10 years ago to protect these old vineyards of Chenin Blanc. So Chenin has been around, it's one of the very first varieties that came to the Cape in 1659. And it's one of the first wines that was also made in South Africa. So Chenin Blanc has got a real deep history in the South African industry. We use it for dry wines, wooded wines, sparkling wines, brandy, dessert wine. So it's really set, you know, in South Africa, and especially in the Western Cape. And the reason it does so well here, it likes our climate, it likes these hot, dry summers, and then it likes our soils. So we've got a lot of shale soils here, and a lot of it grows actually as bush vine and dry land. So this old vine project, it's called, they set out to try to protect these vineyards, because a lot of these vineyards sits between different co-op producers. So a lot of these vineyards end up and goes to the local co-op and ends up in these big blends. And as soon as their yield isn't high enough, then the farmers decide, well, it's not financially viable anymore because they don't get enough money per ton, and then they rip them out. And a lot of those vineyards, or most of those vineyards, actually gets lost in such a way. So the Old Vine Project went around to these guys, and firstly, they documented all these old vineyards. It's for free. Anybody can join the Old Vine Project, and they document all these different vineyards and the age of them. So what makes South Africa a little bit unique regarding to vine age is we're the only country that's got the longest track record of certifying wine and vineyards. So we can track and trace vineyards back to the early 1900s, 1901, 1910. Our system allows that. So not that, you know, the rest of the world doesn't have old vineyards. Spain, Priorat, I mean, they've got vineyards that's been going back even older than that. But South Africa has got quite a unique system in tracing these different ages of different vineyards over this last century almost. So the Old Vine Project, they use that in a way to track these vineyards. And then at the same time, they created a database where you can go and search for these old vines and then go and purchase that fruit in. It's a known fact that old vine vineyards or vines produce better wines, most of the time at least. And it's got to do mainly with these old vines that's really stood the test of time over the last 30, 40, 50 years. And they're almost, in a way, they're naturally in balance. If you know, they know how much to be happy, how much grapes they can produce, and how much, you know, to survive eventually. Like I said also earlier, most of these vineyards are dryland farmed, or were initially dryland farmed. Over the years, maybe sometimes farmers has added irrigation to them, but most of the time they're dryland farmed. So what else want to say now? Yeah, so that's basically the only wine or the vineyards we go out and we look with for these old vine Chennons. So how it got connected to us, so through the MAN project, through some of those vineyards we use with, there's a lot of those old vines, vineyards are situated between the MAN vineyards, and we've got access to those vineyards, and that's how we decided, well, you know, let's stick to that. Let's go into those different vineyards and get some of those pockets, take them out and vinify them separately, and we do that under the Lievland brand. So the MAN also gets some of those vineyards they get, but it's much more. It's a combination of different older vineyards and younger vineyards, where the Lievland wine is 100% old wine certified. So if you look at the Lievland Chenin, for instance, on the back label, there's a little certification seal, and that certifies that it's made from old vine. And to be old vine, it must be at least 35 years old.
So you mentioned Chenin being the flag bearer of the South African wine industry. What coined phrase do you have for pinotage, if any? And do you enjoy working with Chenin and pinotage sort of as your primary favorites, or do you have other varieties you enjoy working with?
You know, that type of question is almost a question on, you know, who's your favorite child, which is very difficult to answer, because some days the one child is more, it's your favorite, and the other day the other one is again. So, and it's the same with winemaking. Winemaking, yeah, each variety's got its own challenges. You know, from pinotage, that can be very difficult and very tricky to work with. I don't have a lot of hair, unfortunately, but most of that is because of pinotage, which gives me sleepless nights. And because one of its parents is Pinot Noir. I mean, Pinot Noir is also, as everybody knows, is quite a difficult variety to work with. So pinotage, yeah, it can be quite tricky, but I love to work with pinotage. And Chenin Blanc, yeah, definitely one of my favorites. I love working Chenin Blanc. I think Chenin Blanc is super rewarding. It's very responsive to the area it grows in, to the type of soils it grows in, and which makes it quite a very fun variety to work with. And like I said also earlier, we use it we make different styles of Chenin Blanc, which makes it also very, you know, fun to work with, because you see different facets and different faces of Chenin Blanc during harvest and during the rest of the year when you blend it. So just coming back to pinotage. So pinotage, like I said, it can be a quite tricky variety to work with. I think back in the day, pinotage definitely, and unfortunately, got a very bad reputation and a bad name. And that's when, you know, in the 90s, when South Africa was allowed back into international market, there was a lot of pinotage, but unfortunately there was a lot of bad pinotage around. And pinotage, if you compare it to Cabernet or any other variety, I mean, pinotage has only been available since, you know, the first commercial pinotage was bottled in 1954. Now, when you compare that to Chardonnay or any other variety, it's been around for hundreds of years or 1,000 years. You know, there's still a lot of work that needs to go into pinotage. So I think we did pretty well with pinotage, because, you know, it had such a bad reputation back in the day, and we were forced as winemakers, South African winemakers, to really focus on pinotage and try to figure it out. You know, there's a lot of top producers, and some of these producers won International Winemaker of the Year with pinotage, you know, back in the 90s. So it shows you it does have the potential to create world-class wines. I also do travel quite a bit, and I've met you before in person in DC, and as I travel, I can still really find people that bad connection and bad image of pinotage that's really stuck. You know, that's mostly people come and say, pinotage, you know, burnt rubber and elastoplast and those bad connotations. But we've really come a long way in making good pinotage. And even at Lievland, we try to make a style of pinotage which is slightly different. In general, we always try to do our wines a little bit different, and we decided we're going to go for a different style of pinotage. We decided we're going to go for the more elegant, more lighter style of pinotage, but still being, at the same time, being serious enough of a wine to, you know, to please a lot of palates. And that's actually, I've learned a lot from that style and making that wine in the lighter side. And I think as South African winemakers, that's actually, you know, a path we've never been down before. And it's only in the last 5 or 6 years, winemakers are starting to become very adventurous with making Pinotage. And it's been successful. I think there's a side of Pinotage we thought would have worked, but it's working at the moment, and it's been quite successful. So the problem with Pinotage is basically it's got a lot of can be quite bitter, hence the bad bittery flavors or burnt rubber type of aromatics it gets. But it comes down to the site, it comes down to viticulture, it comes down, very important, to picking date, fermentation, all those kind of things. So for me, it's like I said, it's one of the varieties that it makes me think a lot, and it keeps you on your toes the whole time. But at the same time, it can be super rewarding and a delicious wine.
I was chatting with a customer just earlier this week or last week, and he mentioned Pinotage, and we're featuring South Africa in our wine club next month. And he asked, will we have a Pinotage? And I hesitated for a moment, and I said, it's a tough decision because it's such a controversial grape. And it's a bit like the Australian Vegemite, you have the pros and you have the con team as well. And but in my opinion, I have seen in the last 5 years, especially, this surge of incredible Pinotage hitting the market, and at all spectrums of price. So it's something that you're absolutely right. The winemakers seem to have really honed in on crafting the best Pinotage possible, and without giving away your secret recipe that you use in the back in the winery. How do you navigate when you're actually making a wine from not a finicky, but a more difficult grape such as Pinotage? How do you navigate those edges, so to speak? Is something like carbonic maceration going to take the edge off, or do you not want to sort of soften it so much?
It's a combination of a few things. First of all, you need to know your vineyard. So when we get a new vineyard for the first time that comes into production, a young Pinotage vineyard, in that first year we look at the fruit, and it's basically an experiment to see what the wine is going to be like. And then so you learn. So you see, all right, okay, it's got a lot of tannin, it's got a very thick skin, which Pinotage usually does have, got a thick skin. And then for me, during fermentation, it's just soft handling. Vineyard wise, sorry, let's take a step back again. So we break a lot of leaves open in the vineyard, in the canopy. We try to get a lot of sunlight in there. We try to soften the tannins already in the vineyard. And then picking date is crucial. Pinotage used to be, or it's still predominantly, winemakers pick it very ripe. So you get high alcohol, and then you put it into oak, which can be quite tannic, and a lot of oak in the wine. So like I said, we do it a little bit different. So we rather go into the vineyard and go and check it out there and try to taste and try to figure out, okay, when's a good picking date for that. And because we're picking earlier, which can be a little bit dicey to do that and risky, you need to make sure to get your tannins ripe, and that's through tasting the whole time. Go and visit that vineyard every day, every second day, depending how close you get to the picking date. And then the second thing, which is quite important for me in the winery, is fermentation. So we ferment a little bit cooler in the Pinotage, try to get a lot of aromatics out, and then literally tasting twice a day. Whenever you walk past that tank, you taste it. Because Pinotage is a very fast fermenter. It naturally ferments very, very quickly. Sometimes you do cold soaking and you think, all right, you're going to start to ferment the next day, inoculate, and it's like, oops, you're already halfway fermented. So that's just a natural thing of Pinotage. It ferments super quickly. So your fermentation period on Pinotage are usually much shorter, and that's why we do a bit of cold maceration to extract some nice fruity flavors and color. And then as quickly as 5 days, 6 days, we can take the juice off, and fermentation can be finished in, by day 8 almost. So through tasting and then deciding when to separate the skins from the juice. That for me is quite crucial. Soft, gentle pump overs, only a few times a day. I'm talking about maximum 3 times a day on pinotage, and that's about it, you know. And then her wood selection, we use mainly older oak. We try not to use too much new oak in it. And if I say too much new oak, we're talking about 10%, maximum, maximum 15%, depending on the batch of wine. But yeah, we've got a lot of old oak barrels. It's been coming along for about 10 years now, 10, 11 years. So there's no more tannin extraction from the oak. It's mainly just the aging process, the oxidation process that it needs to have. And that in a nutshell is basically what I look at when making pinotage.
Brilliant. You know, it's so exciting to hear you speak about what you're doing today and how you got here. But I'm curious, what do you see? What's your vision for perhaps South African wines as a whole moving forward in the future? Are there any trends in winemaking that you're seeing, or perhaps just a hope that you have for the wine industry?
Like I said earlier, also, I'm lucky enough to travel quite a bit extensively, especially in the US. And the US for us is quite an important market. We sell a lot of wine in the US. And in my last visits, when I met you, I could really see there's something around going on with South African wines at the moment. There's a lot of focus on it. There's a lot of hype around South African wines at the moment. And the world is taking notice of South Africa on wine, which for us is absolutely great. And I've always said, and I've always believed that South African wine, is gonna go around the globe like a big wine tidal wave, because I think we've got the potential. If I just talk a little bit about South African wine in the US, it is, even though it's for us our biggest market, it's probably our most difficult market. If you look at South African wines in the US, there's no South African culture in the US. There's no big community. There's no restaurants, South African restaurants in the US compared to, there's a lot of Greek restaurants. There's a big Greek community in the US, and Greece actually sells more wine compared to South Africa. But I think we might have a bigger wine culture, or we see ourselves compared to Greece as having a bigger wine culture, but it shows you what influence a community and a culture can have. So for us, it's a hard battle to be out there, but I can very happily say that there's a big vibe around South African wines at the moment, especially in the US. So I'm looking forward to that, going back to the US and to spread the word there a little bit more. In the rest of the world, yes, Europe has always been very fond of South African wines, and even the East. I think the East is also quite a difficult market for us, but we've been lucky enough to do pretty well there. And then I think for making, with this new wines, we're always busy experimenting. We're always trying to do something else. And I think that's the culture in South Africa, our fighting spirit almost in a way, to always try to improve and always try to be better, and to do that. And not just in our winery here, in the MAN and the Lievland winery, there's in other wineries, there's always, winemakers trying to improve and trying to do new things. And because wine is such a competitive, industry, and it's always, wine is so personal that you need to do something better or something different to distinguish yourself, and to get people to fall in love with wine. And that's what we try to do.
Well, thank you very much. Amazing opportunity to chat with you, and I would agree 100%. I found South African winemakers and trade members to be some of the most passionate and enthusiastically aggressive almost with the message of South African wine, and it really comes from a true passion for wine and the wine industry as a whole. So it's really a very vibrant energy that you bring, and it's really wonderful to be around. But most of all, it's terrific to enjoy the wines from South Africa, especially from MAN, Lievland, and SA. So thank you so much for making these amazing wines. Before we say goodbye, is there anything you'd like to share with us?
As if I can just add on to the last bit I said, and I think you said you guys have the Lievland Rosé on the shelf at the moment, and that's a real example of trying something new. And that one is probably one of our most successful wines at the moment. And it started off as a small experiment when we took over Lievland. And usually when people buy a new property or acquire a new property, they want to make a statement with a big bold red wine. And we're different. When we decided, well, let's do it with the rosé, and we did an experiment, and it worked, and people fell in love with it. So, and I'm happy that you guys can have it as well at the moment.
Well, Riaan, thanks again for joining us. It's been an ultimate pleasure, and I wish you a very, very successful harvest. You mentioned you already started last week, and it's going well.
Yeah, it's going well so far. So, like I said, it's very early harvest. So it's going to be a very quick and very compacted harvest. People are going to battle to get enough space in the wineries because everything is going to come at the same time. So, but it's fun, and I'm really forward to it.
All right, thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you when you come back to DC.
Thank you.
All right.
See you.
See you.